Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me today. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and go to the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and from there you can check out the show notes, click on the links, tons of stuff on there, so make sure you check it out. Also, share this episode with your family and friends, and I want to say Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah to everyone out there. I mean, this is a great time of year. We celebrate with our family and friends. It's a good moment to sit there and actually reflect on our relationships and ourselves as well. Did we live up to the standards that we had for the year? It's also a great time to realize that there's much more important things than just politics in life. I know everything in our world is political, and this is a political podcast, so politics is unavoidable, but spend time with your family and friends. Appreciate the simple things in life, the small things in life, because that's what really matters at the end of the day. Now, quick programming note. This will be the last episode of 2024 that I intend to do. I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks focused on my family and celebrating the holidays. And the PAS Report podcast will return on January 6, 2025. So I wanted to make sure that you guys know that. For today, I have a great episode lined up. I want to discuss the continuing resolution that was passed on Friday to avert the government shutdown. I want to do a 2024 year in review, talk about some key moments that changed the dynamics of our politics. I also want to discuss what lies ahead in 2025. I mean, 2024 was absolutely insane. And so I want to look at 2025 and not only what I think may happen in the political sphere, but things that I have lined up for the PAS Report podcast. So you're going to want to listen to the entire episode. Now, the top story of 2024 was the political comeback of Donald Trump. There's no other story that's bigger than that. And it was an interesting progression because once Democrats brought criminal and civil charges against the former president in 2023, his nomination for president was all but guaranteed in the Republican primary. And I say that Democrats are the ones that brought the criminal and civil charges because that's what they were. Understand that all these cases that were brought against the former president were political prosecutions. Ironically, the Democrats still don't have a clue. They don't realize how the weaponization of our political and judicial system completely backfired on them. That they don't even understand. Just about every single American, so when we look at how 2024 kicked off, just about every American thought the civil case against the Trump organization was ridiculous. I mean, they saw the $464 million judgment as an attempt to try and bankrupt Trump. And not only that, but Democrats at the same time were preventing any real primary challenge against Biden. Then on April 15th, the New York City criminal trial of Trump began. This is the District Attorney Alvin Bragg case, which would mark a major turning point in the election. I mean, understand that Alvin Bragg is a fraud. He is a political prosecutor. He did legal jujitsu to bring this case. These charges that were brought against Trump were never tried before in the court of law, particularly here in New York. But the one thing he did was he changed the nature of media coverage. Trump would now capture the news cycle on a 24/7 basis. But more importantly, while Trump was on trial, he was stuck in New York. So he decided he was going to make the most of it. He visited the bodega where D.A. Bragg charged a store owner after the store owner was attacked and killed his attacker. So he visits the bodega, holds a rally outside of it. He visits construction sites, meets with the construction workers. He gave a rally in the Bronx. And this was a signal. It was a signal that he was going to go after voters that the Republican Party has largely ignored, not just over the last couple of years, but over the last few decades. And then 2 weeks before the jury conviction, you have President Biden, his team thinking they're smart. They ditched the debate schedule and they propose a take it or leave it. They wanted to hold the debate at the end of June, before the conventions, the Republican National Convention, Democrat National Convention even take place, where that would be the legal process to certify the results of the primaries. And it was an interesting move, right? Now, they did it as a take it or leave it approach. And the reason that they did that was because twofold. First, they didn't think that Trump would actually jump on this offer. They didn't believe that, Biden would just be able to put out all these demands and Trump would say, okay, I agree to it, let's do it. But in the event that Trump did take the debate, which he obviously ended up doing, then it was a way that if Biden was a catastrophic failure, if he has a meltdown, if everyone sees that he is cognitively unable to handle the office of the presidency, well, they could try and replace him. And that's exactly what happened. The debate proved to be a disaster for President Biden. It exposed how far gone he is, how far gone his cognitive capabilities are. He was largely incoherent throughout the entire debate, and the calls for Biden to drop out of the race began to grow. Now, I think that this was a huge story because it exposed the cover-up within our system, the cover-up of the media, the one that's supposed to serve as the fourth estate. The idiots that were telling us that this is the best Biden ever, the cover-up that they knew for over 2 years of his diminished cognitive capabilities, yet they hid it from their viewers. And then they acted surprised at Biden's disastrous debate performance. But it wasn't just the media. It was also those in our government. I'm talking about the bureaucrats, those that knew that Biden was unable to handle the office of the presidency. And these nameless and faceless bureaucrats are the ones that were making decisions. Now, we didn't elect them to be president. You would think that there would be some accountability within the system, but there wasn't. And that to me was a shame. But just 2 weeks later, we would witness the first assassination attempt on Trump where a bullet grazed his ear. Trump would get up, say, fight, 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 before being taken off stage at the rally, and we now got that historic image, right? The historic image of Trump with blood dripping down the side of his face, his fist in the air amidst the backdrop of the American flag, Secret Service flanked around him. This would become a rallying cry. And interestingly enough, we still don't know anything about the assassin, right? We have no idea. It's such a bizarre and ridiculous thing that we don't have any more answers today than we did when the assassination attempt first happened. Really is disgraceful. And we should all be asking the question, well, why is that? Why is that? Now, a week later, obviously the assassination attempt, Trump was garnering all the news. A week later, Democrats, led by Pelosi and former President Obama, they go on to conduct a soft coup against Biden. They forced Biden to drop out of a race. And once Biden drops out of a race, he immediately endorses Kamala Harris, boxing the Democrats into a corner. Truly amazing. Now, Kamala Harris, one of the most incapable politicians that we've seen in our lifetimes. There was a reason that there were calls to ditch her off the ticket and select a new vice president because Kamala Harris just couldn't hack it. But this prevented Democrats from actually having any type of mini primary, maybe, where ordinary Democrat voters would actually have a say in who their nominee is. It shows how the same people that were screaming about threats to democracy had no problem throwing the person off the ticket, President Biden, that got 15 million votes, and installing Kamala Harris, who didn't run in the primary. Truly stunning, right? And then in September, we get the second assassination attempt against Trump. And again, we still know virtually nothing about this failed assassin. And it appears we have a media that doesn't seem too interested in getting answers. I cannot say it enough. This is unacceptable. It's ridiculous. We don't know anything new today than when the assassination attempt pretty much happened. And why is that going on? Why is there a cover-up to shield us from information? Where is the transparency? After the second assassination attempt, Kamala Harris, the campaign tried to keep her on script, but they weren't able to do that because the poll numbers continued to drop, and she ended up being a disaster of a candidate. And ultimately, Trump would win the presidency. But it would be much more than just winning the presidency. He would win it. The Electoral College, he won the popular vote, he increased his margins in every single demographic. And as we were busy with the president's race here in the United States, a lot was unfolding internationally. You had Russia making gains on the battlefield in Ukraine. You had Israel decimating Hamas and Hezbollah. I mean, I think that was probably one of the most underreported stories of 2024. I mean, when you talk about Israel's intelligence and military capabilities, I mean, they really are the best in the business. When you look at what they were able to do with Hezbollah, between the whole beeper situation as explosive devices, taking out Nasrallah, who's the head of Hezbollah, taking out several successors to Nasrallah, completely disrupting Hezbollah's operation. And understand, this is what led to the collapse of Assad. Assad couldn't be propped up like he was in 2013, 14, 15, 16. He couldn't be propped up by the Russians because Russia was too busy in Ukraine. He couldn't be propped up by Hezbollah. The Hezbollah couldn't send in tens of thousands of fighters to help Assad. And so one of the surprises was the collapse of the Assad regime, a regime whose family has been firmly in power for 40 years, 50 years? So this was a historic year. Understand that on every single level. And any one of these stories would have been a top story in and of itself. But for all this to happen in a year reflects the craziness of the times we're living in. Now, we need to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to talk about the fiscal disaster of our Congress, the disaster that they keep on contributing to. And even though they averted a government shutdown, what does it really mean for the implications here in the United States? So hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, in this segment, I want to take a look at the fiscal train wreck of our country and how Congress has once again failed the American people. They have once again failed to do their job. They may have successfully averted a government shutdown, but let's not lose sight of the bigger picture, that this so-called victory, it's nothing more than political theater. It masks a deeper crisis going on in our country, and one that is unsustainable because all lawmakers cobbled together a pared-down version of that 1,500-page monstrosity that they initially tried to push through. Now, they did shrink it to just over 100 pages, and that might seem like a step in the right direction. Understand, if you read this 100-page bill, the omnibus, it's a slap in the face to Americans who are watching the government dig us deeper into the financial abyss. And let's be clear, the issue isn't just about the length of the bills. It's about the process itself. How can we expect accountability or transparency with our government when bills are rushed through without any sufficient time for anyone to read it, let alone understand it and its contents? This is why I've long advocated for a new constitutional amendment, one that limits bills to no more than 20 pages. And it's written in plain English so that everyone could understand, not just lawyer speak. Like, imagine a world where every American could understand what their government is doing. Now, I know this is radical thinking, right? I understand that. But given that the American people, on average, have a 7th grade reading level, well, maybe these bills should be written in a simple format so that everyone understands that. And the deeper problem, it goes beyond just process. Outside of a handful of principled lawmakers like Rand Paul, most in Congress lack the cojones to make the tough decisions that are necessary to begin to close our deficit, to begin to address the crippling national debt that now stands at $36 trillion, where we're paying $1 trillion a year in interest. Instead of having statesmen and stateswomen that are committed to the long-term fiscal health of this country, we have politicians that are addicted to wasting our hard-earned tax dollars, politicians that want to keep the gravy trains flowing, politicians that want to curry favor with their special interests. But it's easy to actually just blame Congress, right? I mean, everyone does that. We can't put all the blame on the swamp in Washington, because as much as they are at fault, so too are every single American out there, the American people, because the American people contribute to this dysfunction. And I want to explain what I mean, because we see polls that consistently show, that 65% of the American people believe the government is too big and spends too much money. At the same time, the exact percentage, an equal percentage, 65%, think that the government isn't doing enough to solve their problems. Well, if the government has to get involved to solve problems, it means the government has to spend money. Nothing in life is for free, and for every new program that exists or every existing program, we have to fund it. So while the American people think government is too big, it spends too much money, it abuses its power, many are still willing to empower them further. And this is a mutual contradiction where you have two exact opposite statements and they can't both be true. Okay, this is what highlights the dysfunction of the American system today. Americans demand spending cuts in theory, but when we start to get into specific program areas that are on the chopping block, you start to hear the outcry. No, you can't cut that. That's a program I use, so you can't cut that. It's a great program. So you can cut everything else, but don't cut the program that we touch. And that's part of the problem. This mindset, it's not sustainable. And we're at a critical crossroads, right? We either implement policies to drastically reduce spending, we have to implement policies to reignite economic growth, or we can continue kicking the can down the road until the entire system begins to collapse under its own weight. And surely it will. It's not like we could sustain this forever. And when the collapse comes, mark my words, when this collapse comes, it's not going to be about making incremental cuts. It's not going to be about tinkering around the edges. You are going to see entire programs that are going to have to be gutted overnight. The consequences will be far worse than anything the fearmongers claim would happen if government were to shut down. The consequences would be far worse than what the fearmongers claim would happen under a leaner, more efficient government. And if you want to know what I mean by fearmongers, every time someone suggests cutting the budget or radically downsizing our government, slashing the bureaucracy, we hear the cries of doom and gloom, that it's going to destroy our economy, that it's going to destroy our country, that Social Security won't be able to be paid out, that we won't have a defense anymore. But let me ask you, would you rather bet on a streamlined, limited government that empowers individuals and communities, or are you going to cling to this bloated, unsustainable system? See, I'm going to take my chances with the former. I'm going to take my chances of a limited government that empowers individuals and communities. We have plenty of money coming into the coffers. We could take care of the programs that we need to take care of. But we need to get rid of all those programs that are completely ineffective, programs that simply waste American tax dollars. And we can't just do this with a scalpel, make a little cut here, a little cut there. Okay, we have to begin to pare down by 15, 20, 30%. And I will guarantee you that there's at least 20% of waste within our system. I will guarantee you that we could find 20% of money that is just completely wasted. So it's not really that difficult to figure this out. I mean, every one of you out there should consider how over the past few years, federal spending has ballooned to nearly $7 trillion annually. $7 trillion. That's a $3 trillion increase compared to pre-2020 levels, prior to the pandemic. And I want everyone to let that sink in for a moment. Anyone who claims that there's no spending to cut is either delusional, maybe they got into Hunter Biden's stash, or they're deliberately misleading you. Okay, they claim that these deep cuts are going to impact Social Security and defense. Do you really think that the nearly $3 trillion increase in spending since 2020 went to Social Security and defense and nothing else? Do you really believe that?
Come on, give me a break, man.
I can assure you that the majority of the nearly $3 trillion increase didn't just go to defense and Social Security. That I could guarantee you. You don't add $3 trillion in annual spending without massive, reckless expansions of government programs and waste. These aren't just numbers. This is our tax money. This is our hard-earned money being funneled into a bureaucratic black hole. It's a disaster. And yet Congress continues to operate under the absurd framework of omnibus spending packages. They avoid normal budget procedures. Instead of passing 12 separate bills, each with time for amendments and debate, we get these 11th hour, all or nothing approaches. Lawmakers, they don't read these bills, they don't evaluate their impact, and they don't really care. That's clear. This is not a way to govern, and it's not a way to ensure a prosperous future for our nation and our children. It shows how our lawmakers are completely irresponsible. And Congress, they're going to pat themselves on the back. Oh, we averted a government shutdown. They'll pat themselves on the back. But let's not lose sight of the real story, which is the fiscal train wreck continues. And the only question really is how long we're going to keep ignoring the warning signs and how long till it comes all crashing down. That's the question. Now, we need to take a quick break. On the other side of our break, I want to talk about what lies ahead for 2025, so hang tight and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, let's look ahead to 2025 because on January 20th, the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th president is going to take place. You couple that with Republican control both in the House and the Senate, and we have a potential turning point for the nation despite the low margins because the GOP's margins are slim. But the 119th Congress, coupled with Donald Trump as the president of the United States, well, you can enact some bold reforms. And if Republicans remain disciplined, remain focused, grow a backbone, then we could potentially see some huge victories. I mean, first and foremost, securing the southern border is going to be a top priority under this new administration. We already know that Trump has signaled his intent to reinstate and expand policies like Remain in Mexico that President Biden actually undid the first day that he was in office, the first day. We know that Trump wants to start building the border wall again. And we also know that the administration is going to push for an aggressive deportation plan, initially starting with those that have violated and broken the law, committed criminal offenses, felony offenses, remove those individuals with criminal records and others that are deemed a threat to public safety. Then they're going to go target those that already have removal orders against them, that have already went through the court process, the immigration court process, and it was ruled that they have to be removed from the United States. So we're going to see a reshaping of immigration here in the United States, illegal immigration. That certainly is a good thing. On the cultural front, maybe we're going to witness the death of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, in our federal agencies and our education system. And this, again, is a great thing. We should all wish the death of DEI because DEI is nothing more than a toxic ideology that uses our tax dollars to divide Americans. Enough with this nonsense. And the American people have had enough. That's why they elected Donald Trump into office. And so Republicans, again, need to grow a backbone in Congress because it is the Republicans that are ones that direct federal spending, and they need to cut any of the DEI grants that currently exist, where DEI can no longer be used as a metric for any type of grant opportunities. Another thing that we need to look at is how DEI has been weaponized in our federal agencies and departments. I mean, Department of Defense, where Milley stated, we need to look at white rage, where you had Lloyd Austin convene an investigation into white supremacy in the military and extremism in the military, made this big announcement. Then when it turned out that his investigation found that there is an extremism in the military, that there is not white supremacy in the military, well, they quietly announced that. We need to get our military back to the lethal fighting force that it used to be. That should be the central focus of the Department of Defense. And under a Trump administration, we could see that. Economically, the sky's the limit. You will have Trump doubling down on reducing regulations to spur economic growth, much as he tried to do during his first term. And the regulatory rollback is going to benefit tons of industries, from energy to technology. The aim is to restore our competitiveness on the world stage. Reduce the bureaucratic red tape that currently exists, the bureaucratic red tape that stifles innovation and growth. And I am really hoping, that we begin to see a dramatic drop in energy prices, we could see people, American households, finally alleviated from the economic pain that the Biden administration has inflicted on them through the out-of-control inflation. And then you have Trump and his return to the international world stage, where we could see a sense of stability in global affairs. Our adversaries are now on notice. They have to be much more careful. They have to be much more hesitant. At least initially, our adversaries will be much less aggressive because you're going to see a renewed focus on peace through strength, where the administration will recalibrate the relationships with allies and rivals. You're going to see this administration try to counter China's influence, their growing influence. You're going to see Trump try and resolve the Russia-Ukraine and force a settlement there. Now, challenges will definitely arise in 2025. They arise every year. But 2025 has the potential to mark a pivotal year for advancing policies that many conservatives believe will restore America, will restore our strength, will restore our prosperity. We are going into 2025 with a sense of optimism Doesn't mean that conservatives will get their way on everything, but we could at least be optimistic. And I think it's incumbent on every single conservative out there that you put pressure on this administration to begin to scale back the bureaucracy, to begin to downsize the bureaucracy. We can't just sit here and not critique the Trump administration. If the bureaucracy continues to grow, we have to call it out. If the fiscal recklessness continues to happen, we have to call it out. That's incumbent on us. Now, as far as the P.A.S. report goes, one thing that was abundantly clear to me in 2024, well, I mean, not for nothing, but it's been abundantly clear to me for the last 2 decades, but it's how little people know about the founding of our country and the original intent of the founding fathers. So next year, I plan to introduce series, and it's series that are going to be topic specific. They're going to focus on specific topics, and there may be 4 to 6 episodes per series, and these are going to be quick episodes, 10 to 15 minutes, that will go in depth in certain areas. Now, the first series that I want to do is the founding fathers, but not the founders that everyone already knows. I want to focus on the founders that have been ignored throughout our history, but they played a pivotal role in our founding. And I intend to do other series as well. I'm going to do a series that focuses on our Constitution, a series that focuses on the waste, fraud, and abuse within government, a series that focuses on the abuse of power within government. And if you have any suggestions, you want to learn more about a specific topic, shoot me an email, podcast@PASreport.com, podcast@PASreport.com, and I will be happy to consider a future series on that topic. So I'm hoping to launch this by February. Stay tuned. More news will follow. In the meantime, I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. Enjoy the holiday break. And I'll see you all in 2025.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.